I suddenly looked at the English language and looked at that word going, wow, I never thought of teaming as a verb. A team's team, it's a noun. Maybe an adjective, oh look, they're acting as a team, but never looked at teaming as a verb. Sometimes the first question is, does this decision need to be made as a team? That's the first thing we need to ask ourselves before going into techniques and how we do it and facilitation or post-it notes and dot voting or being the smartest person in the room or so forth, so on. There's a point in my career, in my journey, where I believe I didn't think I did have a choice in what I did. I didn't believe I had the luxury of critical thinking. I didn't have the ability to experiment. I am always being tested. Always have to prove I'm correct. And as I navigate that environment, my life also was changing as you age and kids grow up and stuff. And my first goal was selfishly to help calm me down, to help me reflect internally on how to really approach this. You know in your heart, there is no absolute truth.
Welcome to the Tech Waka podcast, where we dive into the journeys of New Zealand's top tech leaders. Your host for today is Jakob, bringing you conversations with tech leaders and innovators from across Aotearoa. Join us as we uncover the experiences, challenges, and successes that shape our tech community.
My guest today is Ammar Sagban, a tech leader, a coach, and a friend of mine. We've known each other close to 10 years now, and Ammar has done something I once did and then ran away from. He's gone back to academia. In a few weeks, he defends his master thesis, and the whole thing is built around a single, deceptively simple idea, that teaming is a verb. Something you do on purpose, not a box you get put in. In this conversation, we get into teaming, wicked problems, critical thinking, and the one question most of us skip. Does this decision even need to be made by the team? Ammar has also built a tool out of his research that you may find useful next time you need to make a decision. Let's get into it.
This episode of the Tech Waka podcast is proudly brought to you by Wires Uncrossed, lifting the standard of software delivery across New Zealand, Australia, and beyond. A big thanks to Wires Uncrossed for supporting the Tech Waka mission and backing the voices of our tech leadership community. To learn more, go to wiresuncrossed.co.nz.
Hey Ammar, how are you?
I'm doing good, Jakob. How are you?
Yeah, I'm excellent. We've known each other for almost 10 years, and I know that recently you rejoined academia and you're doing your master and you're doing research. And it's really curious for me because I have academia background and research background, and I escaped that on purpose. So it's always curious for me, why do people come back to academia? What was the draw for you that made you go to academia? Can you tell us a bit more?
That's a good question, to be honest. I will admit, I think my reasons to go back into academia was ever evolving. I think my initial impulsive reaction, my reasoning was different when I then started the program and got accepted. And then it changed as I got my ethics number and the proposal approved. And as I come to the end, I defend my thesis in August. I think it changed. So depending on the time that you catch me, there's always a different truth. But I will say my overarching answer, the best answer I can give is going back into academia at such a long gap from my bachelor's initially, which is showing my age, a very long time ago, and in a whole different country, really helped me understand sometimes some of the feedback I get in a workplace environment of there is a place where you need to prove something, while there is another place where you need to explore with evidence about something, about an approach or tackling an area. That, I think, is not so much the reason I thought I'd get in there, but it definitely helps. And I'd very recommend everybody to jump in I'd say every 10 years, especially if you're in the corporate world. under a lot of pressure or in that middle space where you're leading project initiatives, is take a step out, do it in your own time, and then come back in. I think I'm better off for it. But yeah, it's very different also. A master's degree is very different than a bachelor's degree. A bachelor's degree in high school and all the education that most of us get, unless you're one of the lucky few, is really geared around satisfying someone in power of hierarchy, that you're good enough to get her or his approval of passing. While in the master's program or postgrad studies, master's, as you probably know, and PhD even more, in master's, you're asked to come up with your own topic and you're synthesizing existing work into creating a new translation of it. And from what I understand for PhD work, you have to come up with a novel idea or else it doesn't count as a PhD. Now that's exciting, right? Sometimes we, in the line of work that we do, it's not feel the things that you try to do is novel, or you have to reinvent the wheel every single time, customize everything. There's a lot of effort. And I think there is a learning for me anyway, that there is a place and time for these different approaches. So I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah.
It did. And do you think there is a level of tension between maybe academia and industry? They are almost trying to improve the world in a way. But at the same time, they have very different tools and techniques quite often. Sometimes the tools and techniques do go one way or the other, but quite often, and I remember my research where I was doing things that I knew would be very hard to implement. So it was to a large extent, and especially looking back now, it was not really that useful. The only thing I can think about is that someone else took my research and built on top of that. So maybe in some sort of a chain of research, I was useful or my research was useful. But other than that, I cannot really see how I spend the years of my time doing experiments, trying to find new things. And yeah, so do you see that?
Yeah, honestly, you hit the nail on the head. As you're saying this experience or asking about this, I remember a point of one of my initial modules and assessments talking about critical thinking and doing good. And we had this concept of wicked problems. Wicked problem, as you probably know, by definition, if I simply define it as a problem doesn't have a solution, it doesn't have one solution. And I remember it baffled me. I'm like, why are we wasting that? Why am I wasting time? We're wasting time. Time is so precious. And that is, I guess that comes from my background in the working environment, because time is money. If you think about it, if I blatantly put it simply, especially the New Zealand economy that we see and the timing of it all, time is always money. But when money is scarce or has to be distributed over a larger amount of people, whether the company grows or a team grows, it is scarce. So suddenly you're going, cool, efficiency, productivity, value, ROIs. But then when we were in the academic space, that wasn't so much of a concern. And the concern was more about that critical thinking aspect of how can you challenge the problem itself in the way it's even defined? How can you go back to its origins? Is how did this become a problem in the first place? There's a Maori value, and I won't butcher it out of respect, but it talks about looking in the past to go into the future. Our critical thinking asked us to going, what evidence lead us to believe that this could be a problem in the future? And then we tackled the big system, and just the fact of coming up with one approach. I remember the rule was it must not apply to the physics of the universe. And suddenly once you remove constraints from a human being, it was beautiful, not just me watching my peers come up with some things that you may define as stupidly ridiculous. However, with the way technology is going and the possibilities out there, we were challenged that it maybe is plausible. I mean, one person is talking about addressing diversity and bias and a scenario and a wicked problem and different socioeconomic background. I think this solution was about, you know how when you go to optometrist and you have blue screen, right? And one of the critical thinking was sometimes you can't help it and we're human, blah, blah. He's like, there is a filter that you really can't see. Not only you can't see color, but you can't see the physical dimensions of a person's physical attributes, hence not triggering bias. And it was like ridiculous. Who could do that? But I don't know, with what from meta glasses and everything, maybe not. This is where these ridiculous ideas come to life and could solve something. And that was the point early on in the master's degree that made me realize the difference between the corporate world, because that wouldn't fly, right? Like I said, in 12 months, what can you do? I'm like, I don't know. But this is interesting. But they miss out that when we're doing it in module 1 or in the beginning of my master's journey, it sparked that critical thinking. It sparked that what we call thinking outside the box, really thinking out of the box.
Thank you for this, Ammar, because it made me realize that maybe I actually took something from my research times, because I do find myself quite often, and I need to stop myself, am I doing it maybe too much? And I know I'm sometimes annoying people around me, asking those questions and trying to really look at problems from different perspectives and look at options. What options do we really have? Because quite often people are fixated on that one solution, one option, not seeing that there are 5 other things, or that to be able to make a really good decision, we just need to ask a couple more questions, gather information, which doesn't need to mean that we're going to go necessarily slower. It's just we have those assumptions. And what science teaches us is that these assumptions need to be questioned and challenged, and we cannot just accept them. So thank you, because that makes me value that time more.
Oh, Jaco, I'll be honest, I know this is your podcast and not to blow too, but when we first met and our experiences, that portion reminded me of you. One of the most annoying parts of working with you on anything is equally endearing, because you were never satisfied with the first answer. You were always asking, what else? And even though in a similar industry that we're working with, I recognize that at a cerebral level, but my body and my heart wasn't accepting that while you fluidly were confident doing it. So I'd say your postgrad academic journey stayed on with you, whether you knew it or not. And I look back on our time together from 2018, even recently, us talking and you supporting and helping me. But also when I went to that academic journey, I feel like I get Jakob. I get where he came from. So yeah, I think your academic journey stuck with you.
Oh, that's really, really lovely to hear. But let's go back to you. And I'm sure that out of that experience, you have 1 or 2 topics that you're curious about and thinking about or researching. Can you share one of 2 of those so that we can maybe explore it in more details?
Yeah, through academia, I'll share briefly. Picking a topic to explore, especially at a postgrad level, was daunting, because you're used to your bachelor's or in high school, you're told what to do, these 5 papers, and they're small micro topics, and you graduate. But then I was asked to bring a topic, research something that you're interested in, create a research question that you want to explore. And I struggled, and I remember I got advice from my mentor at the university, and she visualized a Venn diagram of what I do on a daily basis, what is my passion and interest. And really, back to that first question is, why are you doing academia? And you draw the 3 centers in line. And anybody who knows me or can see from my profile, my line of work, but also more than just my line of work, I guess my cultural background, even as a third culture kid, and as a whole different topic, we came down to a pure passion and interest about teaming. Teaming was something, I can't admit to have invented the word. I think as an author, Edward Edmondson talks about teaming.
Yes, she did. Yes. Yeah.
So I stole like an artist. And when I looked at that, I suddenly looked at the English language and I looked at that word going, wow, I never thought of teaming as a verb. A team's team. It's a noun. Maybe an adjective. Oh, look, they're acting as a team. But never looked at teaming as a verb. So my research took me down this concept of intentional teaming. talking about teaming on purpose, talking about people coming together with a shared common goal, but a truly shared common goal. And I'll be honest, I don't remember the last time I joined a team that was my decision, that was done autonomously and by choice, by me, to actually go down the road going, "Ooh, I want to join that team because what they're delivering is close to my purpose." And I even remember um, a great mentor of mine, Sandy, who works for Nomad 8, and I think they have a book called, I'm going to butcher it. And I remember that going, wow, imagine a world that can happen. And I'm like, why imagine? What if that did happen? What could happen? And that took me down the academic point of research, asking my question, what does teaming as a verb mean for a team that you get together? Ask me a question of going, surely this isn't rocket science. Sandy's talking about it, and she has lists of sources and resources. When people talk about it and you see it, you're like, it always resonates as a human being. So something inside of you, like some epigenetic memory, goes, oh yeah, that would be a better way to do things. And you think of the capitalistic work constructs, right? We join a company based on a job description, get hired, and sometimes we don't have a choice. So it's not really because I joined company X because they are leading the way to carbon emissions or reducing carbon emissions in New Zealand. If the opportunity doesn't arise and I have to get a job and work with a company that builds telematics or microphone parts and I have the skills, why not? And I find purpose in that, or I make purpose in that through my people. But the other way around, not so much. And then I went down the rabbit hole academically, even more of not only how would you break down the components of what an active teaming verb would look like? What are the principles that define an active teaming? Also going back to the critical thinking or going in history, where was this? Was this ever questioned? I'm sure I'm not the first person who questions it. How did people work and will collaborate in a team pre the industrial age, pre the Enlightenment age, where science and money wasn't so available like we have with many trillionaires? Back then, there's only a king or a ruler, and everybody works for the ruler. And how nice you were and how much you were liked is how much you survived. But it was more, I think, of barter or survival and going forward. And the only thing I can think of as a team is armies. You know, if you think of the original team, it was a hunting team. Then if you think farming team, because we collectively need to grow. Then as we have borders and we have tribes, then there's a fighting team. But surely that wasn't in the same way we make teams right now. And so I went down this rabbit hole.
Can I offer an opinion?
Yes, please.
And it's not my original idea. It is from a person named Victor Cezanne, I think. He's, I want to say, someone in Scandinavia, I think. And he has his blog post asking, before you create a team, ask a question, is it even a team? And it has two dimensions. And he argues that to actually, we have groups, and group is not a team. You can have pseudo team, you can have coworkers, you can have what he calls temporary alliance, and you have teams.
I like
And for him, and I love that. An army, I think, is a great example, but also every sport team is a great example. And
Yes.
whenever in an organization I'm part of, whenever we talk about we need to create a team, I'm asking, or if someone uses the term team, I'm asking, are you sure it's a team? Because if it's not, and you're treating them like a team, you're not gonna get the results you want to get. So just to get to the point, his two dimensions was a team is when they have a common goal and they need each other.
I like that last one. That
So,
resonates.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you have, let's look at rugby team. They have a common goal. We need to win the World Cup. That's our goal, right? So that's why we need to give all our best towards this goal. And we need each other because we all have different skills. I'm an attacker, I'm a defender, I'm better at this, I'm better at that. We cannot be all the same. We need to have all of those skills And if one of the skills is missing, we're gonna be worse team. So we have all of the skills and we need each other. And
Yes.
with army, it's the same. We need each other and we have common goal. And
Yes.
similar, if you have a really good team, you have a goal and you need each other. But
Yes.
very often, you have a group of people who don't have a common goal, don't need each other. They are really coworkers. Let's not call them a team.
Correct.
Or if they do need each other, but they don't have common goal, maybe it's what Victor calls temporary alliance. We just come together, we do stuff because we need to help you. So it's like an alliance, but we don't have it. So let's not call it a team, because if we use the tools that are targeted at teams or targeted at helping teams facilitate something,
Yes.
if we treat those groups as teams, but they are not teams, we're not gonna get the results we wanna have. So if we talk about we need high-performing teams, yes, but is your group actually a team? Because if it's not, you're using the techniques for high-performing teams, you will not get the results that you wanna have. Sorry, over to you. Does that
That was beautiful.
resonate?
No, thank you for sharing that. It's even triggered in me something that I'm going to name drop. Richard, early on in my life, we were challenging even that same concept. And he might have stepped further going, there are teams and there are teams and there are teams. And he gave the analogy of the Olympic team.
Oh yeah.
So every country would have an Olympic team and we have a common goal, right? And we need each other because our common goal is to get the most amount of goals for our country. And we do need each other because I need to get my goals. But how we need each other and what our common goal is needs to be defined to allow what we do together, how much time we spend together, and demarcation of what is it that I need. For example, in that scenario, the javelin throwing team and the gymnastics team just need moral support intra-team. Go deeper into the gymnastics team as part of the Olympics team. What they need and their goal is different. It may cover recovery, maybe sharing techniques, a gymnast sharing techniques to a javelin thrower. It's like, I just want moral support. That's all I need, nothing else. And think of companies, they're all one greater team. And if people are not comfortable with the term of co-worker, not a team, and it stirs up thing, and Matthew Richard says, actually, we're all a team, just depending on the common goal and what we need from each other, determines how we interact with each other. And that's where it took me down in my research. As you can see, this topic is so large, and I got excited about history and conceptual things and philosophical, but also tried and tested experiments that are happening around me in New Zealand and overseas. But I had to hone in for my master's to one topic, and I chose to tackle something dear to me, which was how teams make decisions. And
Yeah.
and it's back to what you said. Sometimes the first question is, does this decision need to be made as a team? That's the first thing
Yes.
we need to
Yes.
ask ourselves before going into techniques and how we do it and facilitation or post-it notes and dot voting or being the smartest person in the room or so forth, so on.
Yes.
And I end up breaking down and honing in, unfortunately, for my interest, but fortunately for my energy levels and from a time box of delivering this master's, or else I'll be in academia forever, which isn't a bad thing. Honing in on that aspect of how how can the right decision framework that's fit for this team influence their productivity. I purposely chose productivity because before, I always tell my teams and my clients and people I work with is, before we strive for high performing teams, have we actually set things up to be a productive team? I think of it, and it's definitely contestable, but if I had to simplify and linearize the journey of a team, before you jump to becoming high performing, there's somewhere in the middle before that is, are you even productive, first of all, let alone high performing? So I kind of narrowed it down to that thesis. And I said in August, I'm defending that thesis and publishing not only my findings and articles, but what I discovered was my master's ends, or my true research starts, of gathering
Okay.
evidence from practitioners on why you use this. And it creates a rule-based assessment to give people not what is the right fit, is like a percentage fit going from what you've told me and what we have, and this evidence from what we've gathered. This has a 70% higher chance of success with these caveats. The second option would be this with these caveats, and third option would be this. Please try it and come back and let us know from a data collection perspective, did it really work? And what is your reasoning behind it? So it really shifted my space from proving what I think is the right way to do it based on conditions to actually creating a construct or a space where I can create that information that can be used by everybody else. Because I'm sure it evolves as our culture changes, as financial situation changes, as human beings evolve. Talk about Gen Zs and Gen X and millennials or whatever the new label is. We all have different ways of thinking, working, communicating, let alone incorporating AI and tools around that.
So you build a tool for that research, right?
Yes.
And let's make sure to include that in the show notes if people wanna check it out.
Yes.
What do you hope to get, or what outcome are you after with this tool?
I will admit I have two outcomes. One's purely selfish, and the other one's more community driven. I am selfish because I took advantage of this research and this academic journey and this web tool to help me answer or challenge my own confusion that was created because I stopped critically thinking. And I must admit, in the last, I guess, 5 years ago, there's a point in my career, in my journey, where I believe I didn't think I did have a choice in what I did. I didn't believe I had the luxury of critical thinking. I didn't have the ability to experiment. I am always being tested. Always have to prove I'm correct. And as I navigate that environment, my life also was changing as you age and kids grow up and stuff. And my first goal was selfishly to help calm me down, to help me reflect internally on how to really approach this. You know, in your heart, there is no absolute truth. And in the role that I play a lot of, sorry, in the role play, but I have a lot of roles there. I'm in a position of power, of hierarchy, roles where I feel I'm expected to have the answer, in roles where I don't feel that comfortable to not get it right. And it's all self-inflicted, I must admit, as much as initially I thought it was something else, but I did have a choice on how to absorb and take on what the system around me had. So that's my internal reflection, and I'm really proud of what I did. And I wanted to prove I can do something because I felt like I was always in the peripheral of everybody else doing something. But my sense of satisfaction came from me doing something that was mine and my contribution, which brings me to a second reason. My second hopes for this is to really invite, and it reminds me of our days back in 2018 when we had a community and these meetups, which were voluntary and people came willingly and we had large numbers. I'll be honest, that meetup kind of spoiled it for me for every other meetup. Every time I join a different meetup or a different group, workshop, I'm like, no, not like before. I want to use it to invite more curiosity, more collaboration. I want someone to use it and come back and saying, Ammar, you're totally wrong. Because. And I'm like, wow. Because sometimes I believe human beings love to collaborate. We all love to help each other. We love to be part of a community, but different things may trigger different responses, and you never know. So I'm hoping this academic, evidence-based, neutral approach to how teaming goes helps me elicit more information and wisdom. And it's done, if you think of open source, it's done in an open source mechanism where I publish all the results as it happens. I have a dashboard on there, but also as you go through the tool and the decision mechanism web app, it does make you think also. And I'm hoping even somebody says, why are you even asking this question? And I've
Yeah.
had links to all the sources where it came from, but nothing beats a conversation. So I'm really hoping that second route of building back a community of people who are curious, who are interested. And yeah, that's really
Yeah.
what I think of.
And what I love about your research is that trying to break this polarity thinking that I often see in teams is that on one end or one extreme we have our leaders need to have all the answers and leaders make decisions. And the other extreme is we need to facilitate every decision. Team need to be involved in every decision. Let's consensus needs to win. We're gonna do all the voting possible, right? But do they actually have enough context to make that decision? Maybe not. I love how you're bringing it more into the center between those, and depending on the context of that decision, the context of the team, this can be either or it can be somewhere in between. You can get the team involved in different ways. And I love that because it shows that it's not so black and white, and there's a space for different modes of decision making in a team. And I think probably something that could be a really good takeaway for the audience is to, when you go to your teams tomorrow, or if you're going now to work, you're gonna have some decisions to be made. Maybe stop and think, how are we going to make this decision? Is it my decision? Is it team's decision? And if you're not sure, check the link in the notes and go to Ammar's tool, and it can help, right?
That and that's a great. If you think about a call to action as leaders, and when I say leaders, I don't mean just the people who have titles and responsibilities. Sometimes influential team members are leaders. Sometimes people with tenure are leaders. So I use that term not loosely, but intentionally. As leaders in the technology space and in the space where we're working with this audience, my call to action is to ask everybody to just sit there and reflect going, how much have they been involved in not just hiring the person or deciding what tech stack needs to be involved or even interviewing, but also in the middle of the journey of a team. How are you involved? How involved are you or can you or would like to be in the actual verb of teaming? That your teams, and you can have 5 or 6 teams in a large organization, or maybe 2 main teams or one team. Because I have seen sometimes that reliance of, we may not see it as a hierarchical structure, but that buffer in the middle. For example, we hire facilitators to help teams facilitate better conversations. But I'm curious, what's stopping the team to slowly with time either want to or see the value of doing it themselves? We hire, for example, and this is by no means me saying these are not needed roles. That's a whole different aspect of how did we end up needing these roles. But I invite team leaders or even hierarchical leaders to actually investigate themselves going, how much of a buffer have I put in and what's the cost of that? We sometimes do it in the interest of speed, but it comes at a cost of a high overhead, which probably indicates some of the restructures that are happening, delay in projects and the overspending or not meeting ROI, if you put it that way. Or have you farmed out with a dependency on that buffer role without challenging how the team itself is growing? If I'm a visual person, I think of a team sitting in a fishbowl. The fishbowl, allows air and oxygen to come in, but you can't really hear what they're doing, and they're doing all the work. And then around them are people with, you think of clipboards, monitoring, observing opportunities for improvements and supporting that. But they're still outside the fishbowl. And I personally, from my reading in my education, even in my career pathway, I don't think the support roles that we learned and see from coaches to product managers to program managers to BA to QA was designed with this end in mind. I wonder how much is it a skill set versus an actual role? And if there is a gap in the skill set, yes, there is value in having that role to support them, but is there an end game? So I invite everybody to kind of ask themselves, why is their team constructed with these kind of roles, and what probably influenced that decision? Because that probably would open up and allow us all to learn. Are we getting in the way of our teams teaming? Or actually, are we really helping them? I don't know, right? And I'm curious, if we all think that way, we'd get somewhere.
I think it's a beautiful way to finish with this food for thought. Thank you, Ammar. That was really fascinating. I'm really happy we reconnected and managed to finally record this episode. Thank you so much. Good luck with your master defend and all of your research. I hope that people got some inspiration and will start using your tool and also give you some data for your research. And I would love to get you back on the podcast, because I think there's probably a few more topics we could discuss.
Oh, Jakob, me and you can talk forever on multiple episodes, but I am grateful to be invited. And I love all your other audience and the interviews you have, and I look forward to hearing more about it. And please, anybody sees this and wants to reach out and wants to deep dive in a particular topic, I would love the conversation. I would love more the data. So please,
Nice.
please, I invite you to use the tool. And thank you, Jakob, and thank you for everybody listening.
If you take two things from this conversation with Ammar, then let it be these. First, teaming is a verb. A team isn't the box you get put in, it's something you do on purpose. So before you reach for the team building playbook, it's worth asking the honest question: is this even a team? Do these people share a goal? And do they actually need each other? And then the harder one: with all our coaches and facilitators and buffer roles, are we helping the team, or are we quietly getting in the way? And second, not every decision belongs to the team. Before the post-its and the dot voting, stop and ask how this decision should be made, and should it be made at all. Sometimes it's your decision, sometimes it's theirs. Usually it's somewhere in between, and that's exactly what Ammar's research is trying to help us figure out. The link to his tool is in the show notes. Good luck with the defense in August, Ammar, and thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time.
A special thanks to our sponsor, Wires Uncrossed, helping teams across New Zealand, Australia and beyond untangle software delivery and build systems that truly perform. We're grateful for their support in making this conversation possible. Check them out at wiresuncrossed.co.nz.